Once in a great while, something crosses into our solar system that was never made here. Not a rock knocked loose from the asteroid belt. Not a comet swinging in from the icy edge of our own sun's reach. Something that formed around a different star in a different age, under a sky we will never see, and then spent longer than the Earth has existed falling silently through the dark until, by pure accident, it passed close enough for us to notice. That is what happened in the summer of 2025. And when the James Webb Space Telescope turned its enormous gold mirror toward this visitor and read the light coming off of it, the answer that came back didn't belong to our solar system at all. It didn't belong to our time either. Because the more Webb studied it, the clearer one impossible fact became. This object is not just from somewhere else. It is from before. It was already ancient, already drifting, already old, before our sun ever caught fire. We didn't discover a comet. We caught a piece of a dead world older than everything we've ever known, moving through our neighborhood exactly once and never again. To understand why astronomers dropped everything for this, you have to understand how rare it is. In the entire history of human observation, every telescope, every survey, every set of eyes turned upward, we have caught an interstellar object passing through our solar system exactly 3 times. The first was in 2017. We called it Oumuamua, and it was gone almost before we understood what we were looking at. The second came in 2019, a comet named Borisov, and the third arrived on the 1st of July, 2025, spotted by a survey telescope in the mountains of Chile that scans the sky for anything moving. Its name became 3I/Atlas. The 3I is the part that matters. Third, interstellar. Everything about it screamed that it was not from here. It was moving too fast, over 210,000 kilometers per hour, faster than any object of its kind we had ever recorded. And it wasn't looping around the sun the way our comets do, caught forever in a long, patient orbit. It was punching straight through on a path that bends once around our star and then leaves. A one-way road, in and out, forever. That was the first thing astronomers understood. This visitor was on a schedule, and the schedule was cruel. It would come close, it would round the sun, and it would vanish back into the black. And we would never get a second look. So they had one chance, and they aimed the most powerful telescope ever built directly at it. Think about what an object like this actually is. Every comet, every asteroid in our solar system is made of the leftover material from the cloud that formed our sun and planets 4.5 billion years ago. When we study them, we're studying us, our origins, our recipe. But 3I Atlas was mixed in a different kitchen, around a different star. Its ice, its dust, its chemistry, all of it froze into place in a planetary system that has nothing to do with ours. It is a sealed sample from another corner of the galaxy, delivered to our doorstep for free, and it wouldn't stay sealed for long. As it fell toward our sun, it began to warm. The frozen gases locked inside it for billions of years started turning straight from solid to vapor, a process called outgassing, bleeding out into space as a glowing halo, a coma wrapped around its icy core. That coma was the prize, because whatever came pouring off this object was the raw chemistry of another world, released into the open where a telescope could finally read it. The window was measured in weeks, and so, on the 6th of August, 2025, the James Webb Space Telescope locked onto the interstellar visitor and began to take it apart. Not with a drill, but with light. Here is the thing most people don't realize about how we study something we can never touch. Webb didn't photograph 3I Atlas to learn what it was made of. It listened to it. The telescope used an instrument called a near-infrared spectrograph, and what that instrument does is take incoming light and shatter it into its individual wavelengths, the way a prism spreads sunlight into a rainbow, and every gas, every molecule leaves its own signature in that spread of light, a specific pattern, a fingerprint that no other substance can fake. So when Webb read the light coming off the coma of 3I Atlas, it wasn't guessing. It was reading a list. Carbon dioxide, water, water ice, carbon monoxide, and a stranger, sulfurous compound called carbonyl sulfide, the kind of chemistry you'd smell before you'd see. For the first time in history, we were reading the exhaled breath of an object from another star system. Not a theory about what might be out there, an actual chemical inventory of a world that formed light years away, taken while it drifted through our own backyard. And think about how strange that really is. We have never sent a spacecraft to another star. We have never held a piece of another planetary system in our hands. Everything we know about the worlds beyond our sun, we've learned from a distance, from light alone. And here was a chance to do the same thing to an object that had come to us, carrying its home chemistry intact, unchanged, sealed inside its ice since before the Earth existed. Webb had one job in those weeks: read the light before the object slipped away, and it did. And then the numbers came back, and one of them made no sense. When astronomers compared the amounts of each gas, one measurement stood out so far from normal that it stopped them cold: the ratio of carbon dioxide to water. In the comets born in our own solar system, water dominates. It's the baseline. It's what we expect. But 3I Atlas was pouring out carbon dioxide at one of the highest levels relative to water ever recorded in any comet, anywhere. Not a little high, not an interesting edge case. One of the most extreme chemical imbalances we have ever seen come off a comet's surface. And that number is not an opinion. It's not a headline. It's a hard, physical fact written into the light. Something made this object very differently than everything in our solar system was made. A comet's chemistry is a record of the temperature and the conditions of the place where it froze. Change the recipe that much, and you're not describing a comet from a slightly different neighborhood. You're describing a comet from a fundamentally different world, one that formed under conditions our own sun never provided. This was the first crack in the idea that 3I Atlas was just another comet passing through. It was the moment the object stopped being a visitor and started being a mystery. Most of the time, when a telescope studies a passing comet, it gets one look and it's over. But 3I Atlas came back around. After it whipped around the sun and began the long journey back out of our solar system, astronomers turned Webb toward it a second time, now using a different instrument, the mid-infrared instrument, tuned to see a range of light the first reading couldn't reach. They caught it on 2 separate dates as it retreated, still glowing, still bleeding gas into the dark. And this time, Webb found something it had never found before in an object like this: methane. For the first time in history, we detected methane coming off an interstellar object, and not a faint trace of it, a surprisingly large amount. Far more methane relative to water than we see in the ordinary comets of our own solar system. Stop and sit with that. Methane is a molecule tied, on our own planet, to some of the most active processes we know. And here it was, streaming off a chunk of ancient ice from another star, in quantities that shouldn't be there, measured by a telescope orbiting 1 million miles from Earth, reading the light of an object we will never reach. And the way Webb caught it made it even more remarkable. The mid-infrared instrument doesn't just tell you what gases are present. It can show you where they are, mapping how the methane and the carbon dioxide spread out around the object's frozen core. So astronomers weren't just handed a list of ingredients. They were handed a picture of an ancient world venting its insides into space, molecule by molecule, gas by gas, as it fled back toward the dark it came from. No interstellar object had ever been read in this kind of detail. Not Oumuamua, which vanished before we could study it properly. Not Borisov. This was the deepest look humanity has ever taken at a visitor from another star. Every new reading pushed the same conclusion harder. Whatever this thing is, it was not built by the same forces that built the worlds around us. The only question left was, how different was it? When scientists put all of it together, the carbon dioxide, the methane, the water, the strange sulfur compound, the chemistry started to tell a story about where this object was born. And it was not a warm place. The mix of gases pointed to a formation environment breathtakingly cold, around 30 degrees above absolute zero. That is roughly minus 240 degrees Celsius. A cold so deep it's hard to even picture. The kind of temperature that only exists in the most shielded, most protected pockets of a young planetary system, deep inside a dense disk of gas and dust, far from any warmth, where light barely reaches. That's where 3I Atlas froze into existence. In the dark, in the cold, in a nursery around some distant star, sealed away from heat, from radiation, from everything. And then something flung it out. Every interstellar object we catch was once ejected, thrown clear of its home system by the gravity of a passing star or a giant planet, kicked out into the emptiness between the stars to wander alone. 3I Atlas was one of these exiles, cast out of the only place it ever belonged, into a journey with no destination. But here is where the story stopped being about chemistry. Because when astronomers used that chemistry to estimate when this object formed, the number that came back rewrote everything. Our Sun is about 4.5 billion years old. The Earth, roughly the same. When we talk about ancient things in our solar system, that's the ceiling. Nothing here is older than that. Nothing can be. 3I Atlas may be more than twice as old. The observations point to an object that formed somewhere between 10 and 12 billion years ago, in a cold, distant region of the Milky Way, back when our galaxy itself was young, back before the Sun, before the Earth, before there was a solar system for this object to one day pass through. Take that to its edge, and the number gets even harder to hold. At the upper end of the estimates, 3I Atlas approaches the age of the galaxy that made it, and comes unsettlingly close to the age of the universe itself. This was not a young comet lighting up as it neared our star. This was one of the oldest objects a human being has ever laid eyes on. A relic from an era when the first generations of stars were still learning how to burn. It had been drifting, frozen and silent, for longer than the Earth has existed, carrying its ancient chemistry unchanged across the entire history of our solar system without ever knowing we were here. Try to lay that timeline against your own. Every war ever fought, every city ever built, every person who has ever lived and died, every civilization that rose and fell, every dinosaur, every ocean, every mountain range that pushed up and wore back down to sand. All of it fits inside the 4.5 billion years since the Sun ignited. And this object was already old when that clock started. It had been falling through the dark for billions of years before the first grain of our solar system came together. It didn't form in our story. It formed in a chapter that closed before ours began. And by the time Webb finally read its light, it was already leaving. We didn't discover a comet. We caught a fossil from the early universe, passing through once. There's one more piece to this story, and it's the part that turned a scientific event into a global rumor. Right as 3I Atlas reached the most critical stretch of its journey, closing in on the Sun when the data mattered most, the flow of information from NASA suddenly stopped. The cause was ordinary and human. For 43 days, from the 1st of October to the middle of November 2025, a shutdown of the United States government went dark on NASA's public communications. No updates. No press briefings. The agency's tracking pages for the interstellar object simply went quiet. At the exact moment the world was watching most closely. And into that silence, the theories flooded. With no official word, claims spread across the internet that 3I Atlas had changed course, that it had vanished, that it was slowing down, that it was never a comet at all. A Harvard physicist had already floated the idea that an object this strange could, just possibly, be an alien probe. And in the absence of any data, that idea caught fire. But here's what almost nobody realized in the middle of the panic. The answer was already in hand. Webb had already read the object. The chemistry was already recorded. While the internet argued about a cover-up, the actual explanation was sitting in a spectrograph's data, waiting for the lights to come back on. When the silence finally lifted and the science came out, it settled the question the rumors never could. 3I Atlas was not a spacecraft. It was not a probe. It was not sending signals or firing engines. Every unusual thing about it, the strange jets, the odd tails, the extreme chemistry, traced back to the same source. Ancient ice from another star, warming for the first time in billions of years, releasing gases we'd simply never watched an interstellar object release before. It was natural, every bit of it. But notice something. The truth didn't make it less astonishing. It made it more. Because the alien probe story, for all its noise, was actually the smaller idea. A machine built by someone is a thing we can imagine. We build machines. We understand them. What Webb actually found was harder to hold in your head than any spacecraft. A frozen messenger older than the sun. A sealed sample of a world that died before the Earth was born. A piece of the young universe, carrying chemistry no comet of ours has ever carried, delivered to us for a few short weeks, and then taken away forever. The real 3I Atlas didn't need to be an alien ship to be one of the most extraordinary things we've ever seen. It only needed to be exactly what it was. It's already leaving. By the spring of 2026, 3I Atlas will cross back out past the orbit of Jupiter, still gaining distance, still cooling, still fading, and then it will keep going, out past the last of the planets, out past the edge of the sun's reach, back into the black between the stars where it spent the last 10 billion years. It will not come back, not in 1,000 years, not in 1,000,000, not ever. Its path bends around our sun exactly once and then straightens into a line that leads out of our solar system for good. For a few weeks in 2025, the oldest thing many of us will ever witness drifted close enough for a telescope to read its breath. And in those few weeks, Webb pulled from it a chemistry from another star, a temperature from a colder universe, and an age that predates our sun. Then it let go. We spent centuries believing the space between the stars was empty, a vast, cold nothing separating the islands of light. 3I Atlas was proof that it was never empty at all, that the dark is full of ancient travelers moving silently through the void, fossils of dead worlds and vanished stars, older than anything we know, passing us by all the time. We just finally built an eye sharp enough to catch one, and by the time we understood what we were looking at, it was already gone.